Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate marble bread, or maybe you want to call it a chocolate marble cake. I call it a bread because, as you can see here, it is baked in a loaf pan, and it is a really nice combination of a vanilla and a chocolate batters, cake batters, that are swirled together. So the first thing we need to do to make our bread is to preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then you will need a loaf pan. And you can either butter it, like I'm going to do here, and I just melted just a couple tablespoons of butter, and then I'm just using a pastry brush. I find that the easiest way. But you could also just spray it with one of those non-stick sprays, either way. I like to use the butter because it adds a little more buttery flavor to our cake. Make sure you get in the corners. We don't want our cake or bread sticking. And then what I like to do, just to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan as it bakes, is just take a little piece of parchment paper and put it in there. Okay, so now, since we have a chocolate batter, we need some chocolate. So I have a saucepan of simmering water, and don't have your water too hot, because when you're melting your chocolate, if it overheats, some people have said they've had a problem with that. It's about the temperature of your water, so keep it low, because we don't want it to kind of seize up if your water is too hot. So you need a heat-proof bowl. I like stainless steel. You will need 4 ounces, 115 grams of either a semi-sweet or a bittersweet chocolate. Now, what kind of chocolate do you use? The kind of rule I have is I always use a chocolate that I would enjoy just eating on its own. I mean, that's the safest way you're going to have a good tasting chocolate cake. So I have that, and then I'm adding a little, to thin out our chocolate a little, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of coffee. I'm just using freshly brewed that I had left over this morning. You could make a little instant, or if you don't want to use coffee, you could just use water. So what I'm going to do, just stir this because you want the liquid to get mixed in with the chocolate, and I'm just going to melt these two together. Okay, that looks good. So what I'm going to do is just remove it from the heat, give it a good stir, and I'm just going to let this cool down just a bit to room temperature. And then when we come back, we will start our cake batter. Okay, so now we're going to start our batter. We're actually only going to make one batter, and then we're going to divide it and then stir the melted chocolate into 1/2. So it makes it a little easier here. So if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. You will need 1/2 cup, a half a cup of butter. I like to use unsalted. I prefer the flavor, but you could use salted. And have it at room temperature. And then I'm just going to beat it until it's nice and smooth. Okay. And as always, make sure you scrape the sides and the bottom of your mixing bowl as much as you need to get all the ingredients mixed together. So now I'm going to add 1 cup, that's 200 grams, of granulated white sugar. And then I'm going to mix this on medium-high speed. We want to get some air into the batter, so probably 2-3 minutes, just until it's nice and light and fluffy. Okay, that looks good. As you can see, everything's all nice and mixed together. You got a little air, and that'll make a lighter cake, which is what we want. So now what we're going to do is add 2 large eggs and have those at room temperature. Mix in so much nicer if they're at room temperature. And then I'm going to add them one at a time, beat one in and then the second. And then for flavoring, I'm adding 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. That looks good. So now for our dry ingredients, in a separate bowl, I have 1½ cups plus an extra 2 tablespoons. By weight, that would be 195 grams of cake flour. And I'm using the cake flour because it's a low gluten flour and it really gives the marble cake a really nice soft and tender crumb. Now I know a lot of people have said that they have a hard time finding cake flour, so you could use all-purpose flour here. You may know that as plain flour, and just use 1½ cups, which is again 195 grams, so either one. And then to that I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now if you use salted butter, you could probably just leave out that salt. And then you could sift it together, or I'm just going to whisk it. Sometimes I notice cake flour can have clump a little bit, so if that is the case, then I would sift it. And you can just use like a regular strainer. You don't actually have to have a sifter. So it's good. Now, what I'm going to do is add the flour into our batter in 3 additions. And I'm going to alternate that with 1/2 cup, 120 milliliters, or 110 grams if you want to go by weight. I'm using a sour cream. You could use a plain yogurt and have that at room temperature. And I find, I mean, if you want a really rich tasting cake, you could use full fat sour cream or yogurt. I'm actually using a reduced fat. I wouldn't use the fat-free because we do need some fat in your cake batter to make a really nice rich tasting cake. So what I'm going to do is add about 1/3 of our flour. And then I'm going to beat that in. Now whenever you're adding flour to your batter, do it slowly, your mixer speed, because you don't want the flour coming up into your face. Okay. And then I'll just add about 1/2 of our sour cream here. Now, if you're using, like I did, the reduced fat, you will notice when you open your container that there's a little bit of water on the top. Drain that off. Don't stir it in. Okay, and now we'll add a little more flour. Rest of our sour cream. And then finally, the rest of our flour. Now that may seem a long process and you say, why don't you just dump all the flour in? But you actually, if you did it that way, you would have to beat your batter a lot longer And what we're trying to do is not to overbeat once you put your flour in. So that's, if you want to know why I do it in stages, because once you add the flour, the more you beat it, the tougher the cake will be. So now, okay, I'll just clean this up. So we have, I'll just mix in. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? Nothing like a cake batter. Okay. So now what we want to do, like I said, we're going to add chocolate to part of the batter. So what you want is a little more vanilla batter than what you're going to add into the chocolate, because of course the chocolate, you want a kind of an even amount of batter for the white and the chocolate. So what I like to do, if you have a scale at home, and if you don't, I would get one. They're pretty reasonable nowadays, and they're so handy. I mean, I like to weigh my flour. I like to weigh everything, actually. So buy yourself one. So now what I'm going to do is weigh the batter, because this is a really easy way to do it. If not, you'll have to eyeball it. So I think when I made this yesterday, I had about 700 grams. So we'll see. Yeah, pretty close. So what I like to do is remove 300 grams and add that to the chocolate, and then I'll have 400 of the vanilla batter. So, and I have my chocolate in a bowl. I'm just going to add it in there. So I get down to 400, or thereabouts. I mean, it's not exact. And it won't hurt if you have a little more of one batter than the other when you're putting it in your pan. And so then I'm just going to take my spatula and just, I mean, I guess you could put it back into your bowl there and just use your mixer, but nothing wrong with getting a little workout in our arms. Oh, doesn't that? Oh, I can really smell the chocolate in here. So it's really, the cake looks complicated. People go, wow, you know, because of the two batters, and they kind of go, how did you do that? Mix them. But, you know, we were only making one batter, so it's not that bad. Okay, so now we have our, move the scale out of the way here. And we have our loaf pan. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this. I have tried it both ways. I'm actually just going to use spoons and to put it into the loaf pan. I have put it into like a pastry bag, or you could use a freezer bag, whichever way you prefer. But what you want is just to alternate the white with the chocolate batters. So what I do is, let's put there. I usually do 3 across, like that, and then I put the white, I mean, whichever way you want to do it, like that, and then I alternate and put the white on the outside and the chocolate in the center, like so. And I go along, I usually have about 5-6 rows this way, and then 3 across. You can do it differently than I do. That's just kind of the way I've been doing it over the years. Okay, so now I'll just put that in there. So now, as you can see, I still have some batter. So what I'm just going to do is build that up. Just put a little more of the white on each. Now, some people like to alternate again on the top. You can do that if you want, either way. But I just build up the batters that I already have. Okay, so I just have a little bit of chocolate left. Don't want to waste any. And just kind of, so as you can see here, we got a real mishmash of batters. So now you can, a toothpick, you could use a wooden skewer, you could even kind of use this. We just want to swirl them together. First, I'm just gonna kind of a little more even. And you can swirl them as much or as little as you want. Just don't swirl them to the point where you have just one color batter instead of two. But so I just kind of make circles through like so. It's always that question of how much should you swirl. So we'll see if I do it too much or too little this time. Okay, I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to kind of smooth it out just a touch. And we're ready. It's ready to go in the oven. So now, as I always say, everybody's oven is a little different. I find somewhere in the 50 to 60 minutes. Now, always check a few minutes even before that 50 minutes because, you know, some people's ovens tend to run a little hot. And what we don't want is it to be overbaked and then it's kind of dry. So 50 to 60 or until a toothpick inserted into the center just comes out clean. Okay, our chocolate marble bread is now done. Isn't that looking wonderful? Now, you will notice there is some cracking. That is normal. So what I'm going to do now is just let the bread cool in the pan on a wire rack for about 10 minutes. And when we come back, we'll take it out of the pan and we'll try a piece. So now to remove our marble bread from the pan, I like to either a spatula like this or even a knife. And then just to make sure, just go down the sides to make sure it's not sticking. We don't want that. We don't want to leave half the cake in the pan. So it looks good. And then it's a little hot, but you might want to use your oven mitts, which I think I will. There we go. And let's peel off the paper. And you can see here the marbling and flip it like that. Doesn't that look gorgeous? I'm not going to cut this one right now because what I find is because we use the cake flour, it has a really nice soft and tender crumb. So I like to cool this several hours just so it firms up a little before you slice it. So what we'll do is we'll try this one. Now, you can see, depending on when you swirl the batters together, you can get, as you cut the cake, you get different. Like you can see here, I didn't swirl it obviously as much as opposed to this one. You get a little more in this one. So as you cut through your bread, you will notice a difference. And I'm going to try get both batters. Very tasty. I really like that combination of the vanilla and the chocolate, because I like both types of cake, and this is just like a perfect one with both. So try this. And you can store this for several days at room temperature, or you could even freeze it. So enjoy. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.